Hyunwoo Kim sat in his chair and looked around the great hall of the Galactic Council. The ceiling stretched high above him with lights that looked like stars. Around him sat thousands of beings from across the galaxy. Some had blue skin and 4 arms. Others looked like giant insects with shiny shells. A few had tentacles instead of legs. All of them were talking and making noise. Hyunwoo had been coming to this place for 8 years. He was the top human speaker for Earth. His job was to speak for all humans in the galaxy. But today felt different. Today felt like the end of something. Yoonji Park sat next to him. She used to be a ship captain in the human space navy. Now she helped Hyunwoo with military matters. Her face was hard like stone. She did not like what was happening either. On his other side sat Dae-ho Lee. He was young and smart. He helped Hyunwoo with all the paperwork and rules. Dae-ho was writing notes fast on his small computer. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. The big speaker at the front of the hall was a Velkari. The Velkari looked like tall humans but with gray skin and no hair. This one was named Council Leader Rathvel. He was talking in a loud voice about how dangerous humans were. The human species shows signs of violence that worry us all, Rathvel said. His voice echoed in the hall. They fight wars among themselves. They destroy their own planet with pollution. They make weapons that can kill millions. How can we trust them to expand into more star systems? Many beings in the hall made sounds of agreement. Some clicked their claws. Others made buzzing noises. A few stamped their feet or tentacles on the floor. Hyunwoo had heard this same speech many times before. The aliens always said humans were too violent, too dangerous, too young as a species. They said humans needed to be watched and controlled. But Hyunwoo knew the truth. Humans had been in space for 60 years now. In that time, they had never started a war with aliens. They had helped stop 3 wars between other species. Human doctors had saved millions of alien lives. Human engineers had built trade routes that made everyone rich. Human diplomats like Hyunwoo had solved conflicts that could have destroyed planets. Still, the aliens feared them. A Thorak delegate stood up to speak next. The Thorak were big and mean-looking with thick skin like armor. They had sharp teeth and red eyes. This one was General Korthak. The Thorak Empire agrees with the Velkari, General Korthak said in a deep, growling voice. Humans are a threat to peace. We have watched them build more ships. We have seen them make new colonies. They want to take over the galaxy. This made Hyunwoo angry, but he did not show it. The Thorak Empire had taken over 12 star systems in the last 10 years. They had enslaved 2 entire species. They were the real threat to peace. But somehow the other aliens did not see this. More speakers stood up. The crystal beings from SciFiPrime said humans were too emotional. The floating jellyfish people from the Andromeda sector said humans could not be trusted. The metal robots from the core world said human logic was flawed. Each time someone spoke against humans, more aliens made sounds of agreement. Hyunwoo looked around the hall. He saw fear in many eyes. Fear and hate. Dae-ho leaned over and whispered to him. Sir, the vote count looks bad. Very bad. Hyunwoo nodded. He already knew they would lose today. The question was how badly. Yoonji Park spoke quietly so only Hyunwoo could hear. We should have seen this coming. They were never going to treat us as equals. The debate went on for 3 hours. Hyunwoo was allowed to speak for only 10 minutes. He talked about all the good things humans had done. He reminded them of the food aid humans had sent during the Velkari plague. He spoke of the human peacekeepers who had died stopping the war between the Zephyr clans. He mentioned the human scientists who had shared their medical knowledge freely with all species, but no one seemed to listen. When he finished speaking, the hall was quiet for only a moment. Then the talking started again. More aliens stood up to say humans were dangerous. Finally, Council Leader Rathvel called for the vote. The question was, Resolution 4471. This resolution would limit humans to their current 47 star systems. They would not be allowed to make new colonies. They would not be allowed to build new trade routes. Human ships would need special permits to travel through alien space. At the same time, the The resolution would give the Thorak Empire permission to expand into 150 new systems. The Thorak had asked for this expansion to protect peace in the galaxy. The voting began. Each species could vote yes, no, or abstain. The votes appeared on the big screen above the hall. Velkari Confederation, yes Thorak Empire, yes Crystal Hegemony, yes Andromeda Collective, yes Core World Alliance, yes. The votes kept coming. Yes after yes after yes. A few small species voted to abstain, but none voted no. They were too afraid of making the big powers angry. Hyunwoo watched the screen. The final count was crushing. 873 votes for yes, 0 votes for no, 41 abstentions. Every single major power in the galaxy had voted against humanity. Council leader Rathvel stood up again. Resolution 4471 passes by a large majority. The human expansion ban will begin immediately. We do this for the good of all species and for peace in the galaxy. The hall erupted in cheers and celebration sounds. Aliens were happy that the dangerous humans had been put. In their place, Hyunwoo stood up slowly. The hall became quiet as everyone watched him. He had asked to speak after the vote. "Thank you, Council Leader Rathvel," Hyunwoo said. His voice was calm and clear. "The human delegation would like to thank the Galactic Council for making our position very clear today." He paused and looked around the hall. His eyes met those of delegates who had once called themselves Friends of Humanity. For 60 years, humanity has tried to be a good member of this council. We have followed your rules. We have helped when asked. We have shared our knowledge and our resources freely. We have bled and died for galactic peace. The hall was completely silent now. Even the translator machine seemed to be holding their breath. Today you have shown us that none of that matters. Today you have told us that we will never be equals in this galaxy. You have told us that we will always be treated as dangerous children who cannot be trusted. Hyunwoo reached into his jacket and pulled out a formal document. The paper was white and had official seals on it. Therefore, I hereby withdraw the human species from membership in the Galactic Council. Effective immediately, humanity will have no further participation in galactic government, galactic trade agreements, or galactic mutual defense treaties. Now there was noise in the hall again. Aliens were talking quickly to each other. Some sounded worried. Others still sounded happy. "We thank you for 60 years of education about our place in this galaxy," Hyunwoo continued. "We have learned much about friendship, trust, and cooperation from you. Most importantly, we have learned who our true friends are." He placed the document on his desk and pressed a button. The document was now officially recorded in the council database. The human delegation will be leaving this station within the hour. We will not be coming back. We wish you all great success in managing galactic affairs without us. Hyunwoo turned and walked toward the exit. Yoonji and Daeho followed him. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet hall. Behind them, aliens began to talk loudly. Some were laughing. They thought this was just another human emotional outburst. They thought the humans would come back in a few weeks asking to rejoin. But Hyunwoo knew better. As he walked through the corridor toward the human section of the station, he was already thinking about the messages he would send. Messages to every human colony, every human ship, every human business in the galaxy. The great experiment was over. It was time for humanity to try something new. The Galactic Council had no idea what they had just done to themselves. Sumin Choi was loading medical supplies onto her ship when the message came through. She had been trading between human and alien worlds for 15 years. Her ship Harmony's Edge was known in every major port from the core worlds to the outer rim. The message was short and official. It came directly from Earth Central Command. All human merchants were ordered to stop trading with non-human species immediately. All contracts with alien governments and businesses were to be terminated. All human ships were to return to human space within 30 days. Sumin read the message 3 times. She could not believe it. Her cargo hold was full of Velkari medical equipment worth millions of credits. She was supposed to deliver it to the human colonies in the Centauri sector. Now she had to turn around and take it back to the Velkari. Her first officer, Minho, walked over. He had read the message too. His face looked confused and worried. "Captain, what does this mean?" Minho asked. "We have been trading with the Velkari for 10 years. They depend on us for medical supplies. Without human medicine, people will die." Su-min thought about this. The Velkari had been hit by a terrible plague 2 years ago. Human pharmaceutical companies had worked around the clock to develop treatments. Human doctors had traveled to Velkari worlds to help fight the disease. The plague was mostly under control now, but the Velkari still needed human medicine to keep it from coming back. "I know," Su-min said. "But orders are orders. We go back to HFY-Prime and unload this cargo. Then we head home." The trip to HFY-Prime took 4 days. When they arrived at the orbital station, the Velkari customs officer was confused. His name was Keltharan. He had worked with Su-min many times before. "Captain Choi, you are early," Keltharan said through the communication system. "We were not expecting this shipment for another week." "I am not delivering it," Su-min said. "I am returning it, all of it." There was a long pause. "Returning it? But why? This is medicine for our children. We have already paid for it." Su-min felt bad, but she had to follow orders. "The human government has ordered all merchants to stop trading with non-human species. I cannot deliver this cargo. You will get your money back." Another long pause. When Keltharan spoke again, his voice sounded scared. "But Captain Choi, we need this medicine. Without it, the plague will come back. Many will die." "I am sorry," Su-min said. "You will need to find another supplier." But they both knew there was no other supplier. Humans were the only species that had developed effective treatments for the Velkari plague. Other species had tried, but their medicine did not work as well. The unloading took 6 hours. Keltharan supervised it personally. He kept asking Su-min to change her mind. He offered to pay double, then triple, but Su-min could not break her orders. As Harmony's Edge left Velkari space, Su-min felt sick. She had been trading for many years, but she had never felt this bad about a business decision. Meanwhile on Earth, Jinna Yoon was very busy. She was the head of Human Intelligence Services. For 40 years, human spies and agents had worked all over the galaxy. They gathered information about threats to human colonies. They helped prevent wars between alien species. They provided early warning about pirates and criminals. Now Jinna was calling all of them home. Her assistant brought her reports from across the galaxy. Human agents were leaving their posts on hundreds of worlds. Some had been working undercover for years. Others had been official diplomats and advisors. "Ma'am," her assistant said, "the Zephyr government is asking why we are recalling our trade negotiator. They have an important deal they want to finalize." "Tell them we are no longer available for trade negotiations," Jinna said. "And the Andromeda Collective wants to know why our military advisor left without explanation. They have a border dispute they need help with. We no longer provide military advice to non-human species." The assistant looked at a long list. "There are 47 more requests like this. Alien governments want to know where their human advisors went." Jinna looked tired. "Give them all the same answer. Humanity is no longer available to help with galactic affairs. They wanted us gone from the Galactic Council. Now we are gone from everything." But it was not just spies and diplomats leaving. All over the galaxy, humans were packing up and going home. Human doctors left alien hospitals. Human engineers stopped working on alien construction projects. Human scientists ended their research partnerships with alien universities. On the trade station orbiting Nexus Prime, Wu Jin Nam was overseeing the shutdown of the largest humanitarian aid operation in the galaxy. For 20 years, the Human Relief Foundation had provided food, medicine, and emergency supplies to species hit by disasters. Their warehouses held enough supplies to feed 10 million beings for a year. Their ships could reach any part of the galaxy within days. Their medical teams had saved countless lives during famines, plagues, and natural disasters. Now it was all shutting down. Director Nam, one of his workers, said, "We have received 17 emergency requests in the last hour. There is a famine on Rigel 7, a plague outbreak on Kepler Station, an earthquake on Vega Prime. They all need our help." Wu Jin shook his head. "We are no longer providing aid to non-human populations. All our resources are being recalled to human space. But sir, millions will die without our help. That is no longer our responsibility. The worker looked shocked. Sir, we have been helping these people for decades. They depend on us. How can we just abandon them? Wu Jin understood how the worker felt. He felt the same way. But orders were orders. The Galactic Council made it clear that humanity is not welcome as an equal partner. We are withdrawing from all galactic activities. That includes humanitarian work. Over the next few weeks, the effects began to show. On SciFiPrime, hospitals started running out of medicine. Doctors tried to stretch their supplies, but it was not enough. The plague began to spread again. The Zephyr Confederation tried to finalize a trade deal with the Crystal Hegemony without human mediators. The negotiations broke down after 2 days. Both sides accused each other of cheating. What should have been a simple trade agreement turned into a diplomatic crisis. The Andromeda Collective faced raids by space pirates. Usually, human intelligence services would warn them about pirate movements. Now they had to discover attacks on their own. 3 cargo convoys were destroyed before they realized what was happening. On dozens of worlds, construction projects ground to a halt. Human engineers had been working on everything from space elevators to terraforming plants. When they left, the alien workers discovered they could not finish the projects. The human designs were too complex. The technology was too advanced. University research programs collapsed without human scientists. Humans had been leaders in medical research, physics, and engineering. Their alien colleagues found that they could not continue many projects without human expertise. The Galactic Communication Network began having problems. Humans had built and maintained much of the network's infrastructure. Without human technicians, messages started taking longer to deliver. Some messages were lost completely. Emergency response systems failed. When disasters struck alien worlds, the response was slow and confused. The humans had coordinated most galactic emergency services. Without them, rescue efforts were poorly organized. Food distribution networks broke down. Human agricultural worlds had been feeding billions of aliens. Human cargo ships had delivered food to hungry populations. Now that food was staying in human space, financial markets became unstable. Human banks had provided loans and investment capital throughout the galaxy. Human economists had helped stabilize currencies during crises. Without this support, several alien economies began to wobble. The first aliens to panic were the Velkari. When their medicine supplies ran low, they sent desperate messages to Earth. They offered huge sums of money for just one shipment of plague medicine. The response was silence. They tried calling human pharmaceutical companies directly. The companies said they were no longer authorized to sell to non-human customers. They sent ambassadors to human worlds. The ambassadors were politely turned away at the border. Other species began to notice problems too. The Zephyr Confederation tried to hire human engineers for a failing space station project. No humans would take the job. The Core World Alliance requested human military advisors for a training program. The request was denied. The Crystal Hegemony asked for human doctors to help with a medical emergency. The doctors stayed home. Slowly, the alien species of the galaxy were learning something they had never understood before. They had depended on humanity far more than they realized. Humans had not just been members of the Galactic Council. They had been the invisible foundation that held galactic civilization together, and now that foundation was gone. In her office, on Earth, Jinna Yoon watched reports coming in from across the galaxy. Alien governments were starting to worry. Their economies were struggling. Their people were suffering. Their leaders were asking questions. Where had all the humans gone? When would they come back? How could this problem be fixed? But Jinna had orders to ignore all requests from alien governments. Humanity was no longer interested in galactic affairs. The Great Silence had begun. Tae Young-seo sat in his office on Earth and watched the galaxy tear itself apart. 6 months ago, he had been the human ambassador to the Zephyr Confederation. He had spent 15 years helping to keep peace between the crystal beings and their neighbors. Now he was back on Earth, working as a strategic advisor to the Human High Council. His communication device had been beeping all morning. Alien diplomats were trying to reach him. His old contacts in the Zephyr government, trade ministers from a dozen species, even some Velkari officials who had once called him friend. He ignored them all. On his desk were intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The news was getting worse every day. Mi Kyung-han knocked on his door and entered. She was the best economic analyst in human space. Her job was to track what was happening to the galactic economy. "The numbers are bad, Tae-young," Mi Kyung said, as she sat down. She placed a tablet on his desk. "Galactic GDP has dropped 23% in 6 months. 7 species are facing major economic collapse. Unemployment is rising everywhere." Tae-young looked at the charts on her tablet. Red lines showed declining production, failed harvests, and rising prices. "What about the major powers?" "The Velkari are in the worst shape," Mi Kyung said. "Their plague is spreading again. They are spending all their money on inferior medicine from other species. It costs 10 times more than human medicine and works half as well." She swiped to another chart. "The crystal hegemony is having supply chain problems. They depended on human cargo ships to move goods between their worlds. Now it takes 3 times longer to transport anything. And the Thorak Empire? They are doing better than most, but even they have problems. They expanded into all those new systems, but they cannot control them effectively. They used to rely on human intelligence networks to spot rebels and pirates. Now they are fighting blind." Tae-young nodded. This was what the Human High Council had expected. But the speed of the collapse was surprising even them. The communication device beeped again. This time it was an emergency signal from the Galactic Council. Someone was trying to reach him with urgent priority. "Are you going to answer it?" Mi Kyung asked. "No," Tae-young said. "Let them talk to each other for once." Across the galaxy, the Zephyr Confederation and the Crystal Hegemony were preparing for war. The conflict had started with a simple trade dispute. The Zephyr wanted to ship crystal minerals through crystal space. The Crystal Hegemony wanted higher fees for using their shipping lanes. In the past, human diplomats would have mediated this dispute. They had solved dozens of similar problems over the years. Human negotiators were known for being fair and practical. Both sides trusted them to find compromises that worked, but there were no human diplomats available now. The Zephyr tried to negotiate directly with the crystal beings, but the two species did not understand each other well. Zephyr communication was based on light patterns and musical tones. Crystal being communication used electromagnetic fields and mathematical equations. Without human translators and cultural experts, the negotiations went badly. Each side thought the other was being rude and dishonest. What started as a trade dispute became a diplomatic crisis. The diplomatic crisis became threats of violence. 3 days later, Zephyr warships attacked a crystal convoy. Dong-hyun Park was sitting in his retirement home when news of the war reached Earth. He had been the human coordinator for galactic peacekeeping operations. For 20 years, he had helped prevent or stop conflicts between alien species. His former assistant called him with the news. "Sir, the Zephyr and Crystal beings are at war. Their fleets are fighting in the neutral zone. Hundreds of ships have been destroyed." Dong-hyun felt sad but not surprised. "What about the Galactic Council? Are they sending peacekeepers?" "They tried, sir. But the Galactic Peacekeeping Force was mostly human officers with alien troops. Without human leadership, the force has fallen apart. Some alien officers are trying to maintain order, but they have no experience with multi-species operations. This was another thing the aliens had not understood. Humans had not just provided soldiers for galactic peacekeeping. They had provided leadership, coordination, and strategic planning. Human officers were good at working with different species. They understood how to make aliens from different worlds fight together as one unit. Without humans, the Galactic Peacekeeping Force was just a collection of confused alien soldiers with no clear command structure. The war between Zephyr and Crystal, forces spread quickly. Other species were forced to choose sides or stay neutral. Trade routes became dangerous as warships patrolled everywhere. Merchant ships were attacked by both sides. But this was not the only war. The Thorak Empire was facing 3 separate rebellions in their new territories. The species they had conquered were fighting back. Usually the Thorak could crush rebellions quickly because their human advisors helped them predict where rebels would strike. Now the Thorak had to fight blind. Rebel attacks came as complete surprises. Thorak supply convoys were ambushed. Thorak commanders made tactical mistakes because they did not understand local conditions. The Andromeda Collective was also having problems. Space pirates had become much bolder without human intelligence networks to track them. Pirates knew that shipping companies could no longer get advance warning of attacks. Cargo losses increased by 400%. On dozens of worlds, humanitarian crises were getting worse. The famine on Rigel 7 had spread to 3 neighboring systems. Without human food aid, millions were starving. Local governments tried to provide help, but they lacked the ships and organization to move supplies efficiently. The plague on Kepler Station had killed 50,000 people. Other species had sent medicine, but it was the wrong type. They did not understand how to treat the disease. Human doctors could have solved the problem in days. Natural disasters were becoming catastrophes. When an earthquake struck Vega Prime, the rescue effort was chaos. Different species sent help, but they could not coordinate their efforts. Rescue teams got in each other's way. Supplies were delivered to the wrong places. Thousands died who could have been saved. Mi Kyung-han updated her economic analysis every week. Each report showed more problems. Manufacturing is down across all sectors, she told Tae-young during one of their meetings. Alien factories depended on human components and materials. Without them, production lines are shutting down. She showed him pictures from industrial worlds. Factories sat empty. Workers had no jobs. Families could not afford food or housing. Interstellar banking is also collapsing, Mi Kyung continued. Human banks provided credit and currency exchange services throughout the galaxy. Without them, it is becoming difficult for species to trade with each other. The effects were visible everywhere. On Velkari Prime, hospitals were closing because they could not afford medicine. Schools shut down because they could not pay teachers. Government services stopped working because they had no money. The Crystal Hegemony tried to build their own cargo fleet to replace human ships, but they discovered that humans had designed most of the navigation systems used in galactic trade. Without access to human technology, their ships got lost or crashed. The Core World Alliance attempted to restart their manufacturing sector without human components. But human-made parts were integrated into almost every piece of advanced technology. Trying to replace them was like trying to rebuild a clock with missing gears. Communication networks continued to deteriorate. Messages between star systems took longer to deliver. Some regions lost contact with each other completely. The galactic internet started breaking down as human-maintained servers went offline. Scientific research ground to a halt on hundreds of worlds. University laboratories could not continue their experiments without human colleagues. Medical research was particularly affected because humans had been leaders in most fields of medicine. Cultural exchange programs ended. Humans had been the most enthusiastic participants in galactic arts, music, and literature programs. Without them, different species stopped sharing their cultures with each other. Even sports leagues collapsed. The Galactic Athletics Championship was canceled because human athletes and organizers were gone. Humans had been popular competitors in many sports. More importantly, they had been the best at organizing large multi-species events. As the crisis deepened, some alien leaders began to understand what had happened. They started to realize how much they had depended on humanity. But their pride prevented them from admitting this publicly. The Velkari government sent secret messages to Earth. They offered huge payments for just a small amount of plague medicine. The messages were returned unopened. The Zephyr Confederation tried to hire human military advisors through private companies. They offered 10 times the normal salary. No humans were interested. The Crystal Hegemony asked human universities to continue joint research programs. They said they would pay all costs and give humans full credit for any discoveries. The universities said no. In his office, Tae-young Seo received daily reports about these desperate attempts to reconnect with humanity. Alien governments were offering incredible sums of money. They promised special rights and privileges. Some even offered to make humans equal partners in their governments. But the human response was always the same: silence. Jae-hyun Kim stood at the window of his office and looked out at the Seoul skyline. As president of the Human High Council, he had one of the best views on Earth. The city stretched to the horizon, full of lights and life. Somewhere out there, among the stars, entire civilizations were collapsing. It had been 1 year since humanity left the Galactic Council, 1 year since the Great Silence began. On Jae-hyun's desk were hundreds of messages from alien governments. Pleas for help, offers of money and resources, desperate attempts to restart communication. He had read none of them. His assistant knocked and entered. "Mr. President, Admiral Sun-hee Lim is here for your meeting." Sun-hee Lim walked into the office. She was the commander of the Human Defense Fleet. Her ships protected human space from pirates and criminals. She was a tough woman who had fought in several battles, but today she looked troubled. "Mr. President," Sun-hee said as she sat down, "I need to discuss the situation in the Outer Rim." Jae-hyun nodded. He knew what she was going to say. Reports had been coming in all week. "The Thorak expansion has triggered a massive refugee crisis," Sun-hee continued. "Their war machine is destroying everything in its path. Billions of beings are fleeing their advance. Entire species are being wiped out." She placed a tablet on his desk. Images showed refugee ships packed with frightened aliens, space stations overflowing with displaced families, makeshift camps on barren worlds where people lived in terrible conditions. "The traditional refugee processing systems have collapsed," Sun-hee said. "Those were mostly run by human organizations. Without us, there is no coordination, no supply distribution, no medical care. Refugees are dying by the millions." Jae-hyun looked at the images. Children with big eyes stared at the camera. Mothers held babies that looked sick and hungry. Elderly beings sat on the ground with nowhere to go. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" Sun-hee hesitated. "Sir, some of my officers are asking permission to provide humanitarian assistance. Not military intervention, just food, medicine, and transport for refugees. We have ships sitting idle that could save lives. And you? What is your recommendation?" Sun-hee was quiet for a long moment. "Sir, I understand why we withdrew from galactic affairs. The alien species treated us badly. They called us dangerous and primitive. They voted to restrict our expansion while giving the Thorak everything they wanted." She paused and looked out the window. "But Mr. President, genocide is happening out there. The Thorak are not just conquering territory. They are erasing entire cultures, and we have the power to help the victims." Jae-hyun had been expecting this conversation. He had been preparing for it since the refugee crisis began. "Admiral, I appreciate your concern for innocent lives. It shows you have not forgotten our human values, but I must ask you a question." He stood up and walked to his desk. "Where were these innocent beings when the Galactic Council voted to quarantine humanity? Where were their voices when we were called dangerous and primitive? Where were their protests when our expansion rights were taken away?" Sun-hee did not answer immediately. She knew he was right. "They stood by and watched," Jae-hyun continued. "They said nothing when we were humiliated. They were silent when we were treated as second-class citizens. Some of them even cheered." He picked up one of the message tablets from his desk. "Now they want our help. Now they remember that humans have values like compassion and justice, but only now when they need us." "Sir," Sun-hee said carefully, "I understand your anger. We all feel it. But if we do nothing, our values mean nothing. How are we different from the Thorak if we stand by and watch genocide happen?" This was the argument Jae-hyun had been wrestling with for weeks. Many humans were asking the same question. How could they maintain their humanity while ignoring such suffering? "Admiral," he said, "our values have not changed, but our responsibilities have. For 60 years we tried to be the galaxy's conscience. We tried to be the peacekeepers and the helpers. In return, we were rejected and insulted." He walked back to the window. "The galaxy chose to manage its affairs without us. Now they must live with that choice. If we rescue them every time there is a crisis, they will never learn. They will never change. Sun-hee nodded slowly. She understood the logic, but it still felt wrong to her. What about limited intervention? We could save some refugees without getting involved in the war itself. No, Jae-hyun said firmly. Any help we provide now will be seen as weakness. The aliens will think they can treat us badly, and we will always come back to help them. That pattern must be broken. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session. But they were not meeting in their grand chamber on Nexus Prime. That facility had been destroyed in the fighting between Zephyr and Crystal forces. Instead, they met in a small conference room on a minor trading station. Only half the original member species were represented. Some had withdrawn from the council to focus on their own problems. Others had been conquered by the Thorak or destroyed in various wars. Council leader Rathvel of the Velkari looked older and sicker than he had a year ago. The plague on his homeworld was spreading again. His people were dying in large numbers. The medicine from other species was not working well. Friends and colleagues, Rathvel said in a weak voice, we face the greatest crisis in galactic history. Wars are spreading. Economies are collapsing. Millions are dying. We must find a solution. General Korthak of the Thorak Empire was also present. His species was doing better than most, but even they had problems. The solution is simple, he growled. We must restore order through strength. The Thorak Empire is willing to take control of the chaos. Several other delegates made sounds of fear and anger. They knew what Thorak control meant. Slavery and destruction. That is not a solution, said the representative from the Andromeda Collective. That is conquest. We need real solutions to these problems. Then what do you suggest? Rathvel asked. The room was quiet. Nobody had good ideas. Every solution they could think of required resources or expertise they no longer had. Finally, a small voice spoke up. It was the delegate from the Centauri Trade Association, a minor species that had always been friendly to humans. Perhaps, the delegate said nervously, we should consider asking the humans to return. The room exploded in angry voices. Many delegates shouted at once. How dare anyone suggest such a thing? Humans were dangerous. They could not be trusted. It would show weakness. But when the shouting died down, Rathvel spoke quietly. What exactly are you suggesting? The Centauri delegate looked frightened but continued. The humans withdrew because we treated them as inferiors. They left because we would not recognize them as equals. Perhaps if we offered them full partnership. Never, General Korthak roared. The Thorak Empire will not bow to humans. We are the strongest species in the galaxy. Are you? Asked another voice. It was the delegate from the Core Worlds Alliance. If you are so strong, why can you not control your new territories? Why are rebels destroying your supply lines? Why are pirates raiding your convoys? General Korthak's red eyes blazed with anger, but he had no good answer. The debate went on for hours. Some delegates wanted to try negotiating with humans. Others refused to consider it. A few suggested trying to solve their problems without human help. But everyone knew the truth, even if they would not say it out loud. The galaxy needed humanity more than humanity needed the galaxy. On Earth, Bo-Ram Jung was preparing for the possibility of new negotiations. She was the most experienced human diplomat available. If talks ever resumed with alien governments, she would likely lead the human side. But for now, she was just planning. Reading reports, studying the collapse of galactic civilization, learning which species might be willing to treat humans as equals and which ones never would. The Velkari are desperate, she told President Jae-hyun during one of their meetings. Their messages are getting more frantic every day. They are offering us anything we want in exchange for plague medicine. What about the others? The Crystal. Hegemony is facing complete economic collapse. They are willing to give humans full voting rights in their government. The Zephyr Confederation is offering us 3 star systems if we help them end their war. Jae-hyun listened to these offers without emotion. And the major powers? The ones who led the vote against us? Boram consulted her notes. The Core Worlds Alliance is holding out. They admit they have problems, but they will not publicly ask for human help. The Thorak Empire is still expanding and conquering. They show no sign of wanting peace. What about the Galactic Council itself? They have sent unofficial messages through third parties. Nothing direct. They are too proud to admit they made a mistake. Jae-hyun thought about this. Pride was keeping the galaxy from healing. Alien pride and stubbornness were prolonging the crisis. But humans had pride too. They had been insulted and rejected. They had been called dangerous and primitive. Now the same aliens who had voted against them wanted their help. Continue monitoring the situation, Jae-hyun told Boram. But no responses to any requests, not yet. Sir, Boram said carefully, how long are we planning to wait? The suffering out there is getting worse every day. Until they admit they were wrong, Jae-hyun said. Until they publicly acknowledge that humans deserve to be treated as equals. Young-sik Choi walked through the corridors of the station that now housed the Galactic Council. 18 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs. The once Grand Council complex on Nexus Prime was a burned ruin. This small trading station in the neutral zone was all that remained of galactic government. Young-sik was President Jae-hyun Kim's special envoy. He had been sent to deliver humanity's response to the Council's formal request for renewed diplomatic contact. The message he carried would either begin healing the galaxy or confirm its final collapse. The station was crowded with refugees. Beings from dozens of species lived in temporary shelters along the corridors. Children with different colored skin and strange shapes played together in the common areas. Adults waited in long lines for food and medical care. Young-sik saw the desperation in their eyes. These were the survivors of the Thorak expansion. Their worlds had been conquered or destroyed. Their families had been scattered across the galaxy. Many had lost everything except their lives. But he also remembered the votes in the old council chamber. Many of these same species had cheered when humanity was restricted and humiliated. They had called humans dangerous and primitive while supporting the truly dangerous Thorak Empire. Now they knew better. But knowledge that comes from suffering is always expensive. The council chamber was much smaller than the old one. Instead of thousands of delegates, only a few dozen remained. Many species had withdrawn from galactic government to focus on survival. Others had been conquered or destroyed. Council leader Rathvel looked terrible. The Velkari plague had aged him rapidly. His gray skin was pale and sickly. His hands shook as he tried to maintain dignity. Envoy Young-sik, Rathvel said in a weak voice. Thank you for coming. We are grateful that humanity has agreed to listen to our request. Young-sik nodded politely but said nothing. He was here to deliver a message, not to negotiate. As you can see, Rathvel continued, the galaxy faces unprecedented challenges. Wars rage across multiple sectors. Economic systems have collapsed. Refugee populations grow daily. Disease and famine spread without control. He paused to cough. The sound was wet and painful. We acknowledge that we made mistakes in our past dealings with humanity. We were perhaps too cautious about human expansion, too concerned about potential risks rather than actual benefits. This was as close to an apology as the proud Velkari leader could manage. But Young-sik had been instructed to wait for more. Other delegates spoke up. The representative from the Core Worlds Alliance admitted that their manufacturing had collapsed, without human components. The Andromeda Collective described their struggles with pirates and criminals. Even some smaller species talked about how much they missed human aid and cooperation. But nobody mentioned the vote 18 months ago. Nobody acknowledged that they had unanimously declared humanity too dangerous to expand into new territories. Finally, Rathvel asked the question everyone was thinking. Envoy Young-sik, would humanity consider returning to galactic affairs? We would welcome human participation in addressing these crises. Young-sik stood up. He was a small man, but his presence filled the room. Every alien delegate watched him, carefully. They knew that humanity's answer would determine whether galactic civilization survived or died. "Honorable delegates," Young-sik said, "President Kim has asked me to deliver his response to your request." He pulled out a formal document and began to read. "The human species appreciates the Galactic Council's invitation to resume participation in galactic affairs. However, before humanity can consider such participation, certain conditions must be met." The room was completely silent. Even the refugees in the corridor seemed to stop moving. "First," Young-sik continued, "humanity must be granted full membership in any new galactic government structure. This means equal voting rights, equal representation, and equal treatment under all galactic laws." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Equal treatment meant humans would have the same rights as the oldest and most powerful species. Second, humanity demands a permanent seat on the Galactic Security Council with veto power over any military or expansion decisions. Never again will human growth be restricted while aggressive empires are rewarded. This caused whispered conversations throughout the chamber. A permanent seat with veto power meant humans could block any decision they disagreed with. Third, all previous restrictions on human expansion and colonization are hereby declared null and void. Humanity will settle any systems we choose without seeking permission from this council or any other body. Now there were louder murmurs. Some delegates looked angry. They were being asked to give humans everything they had previously denied them. Fourth, Young-sik said, raising his voice slightly, "The Galactic Council must formally acknowledge that Resolution 4471, which restricted human expansion while authorizing thorac aggression, was an error in judgment that contributed to the current crisis." This was the hardest demand. It required the Council to admit they had been wrong, that their fear and prejudice had helped cause the wars and suffering now plaguing the galaxy. Young-sik looked around the chamber. "These are humanity's terms. For renewed cooperation, they are not negotiable. Accept them all or continue managing galactic affairs without us." He folded the document and sat down. The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates were outraged by the demands. Others seemed relieved that humanity was at least willing to discuss returning. General Korthak of the Thorak Empire stood up. His species had conquered dozens of systems during the chaos. They were the only major power that had benefited from humanity's withdrawal. "These terms are unacceptable," he roared. "Humans want to become the rulers of the galaxy. They want to dominate all other species." Young-sik looked at him calmly. "General, humanity ruled nothing when we were members of this council. We asked for nothing except fair treatment and the right to expand peacefully. In return, we provided aid, mediation, peacekeeping, and economic support to hundreds of worlds." He stood up again. "Your empire, on the other hand, has conquered 47 systems since we left. You have enslaved entire species and destroyed countless lives. Which of us seeks galactic domination?" The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew Young-sik was right. The Thorak had used the chaos to build an empire through force. Humans had used their time in the council to build peace through cooperation. Rathvel spoke up weakly. "The terms are substantial. We will need time to consider them and consult with our governments." "Of course," Young-sik said, "but understand that time is limited. Every day you delay, more people die. More systems fall to the Thorak. More refugees flee their homes." He walked toward the exit. "Humanity has spent 18 months learning to live without the galaxy. We are prosperous and secure in our own space. We do not need you anymore. The question is whether you need us enough to treat us as equals." As Young-sik left the chamber, the debate began in earnest. Some delegates wanted to accept the terms immediately. Others argued that they were too harsh. A few suggested trying to negotiate modifications. But everyone knew the reality. The galaxy was dying without humanity. Wars were spreading. Economies were collapsing. Billions were suffering. Meanwhile, human space was thriving. Human colonies were growing and prosperous. Human ships traveled safely through well-patrolled space routes. Human scientists made new discoveries every day. Human artists created beautiful works that lifted the spirit. The contrast was obvious to anyone willing to see it. Over the next week, delegates contacted their home governments. The debates were fierce. Pride fought against necessity. Prejudice battled with desperation. Basin, Velkari were the first to agree. Their plague was killing millions. They needed human medicine more than they needed their dignity. The Crystal Hegemony agreed next. Their economy had completely collapsed without human trade networks. They were facing starvation on several worlds. One by one, other species fell, in line. The Core Worlds Alliance held out the longest, but even they eventually agreed when their industrial production dropped to 20% of pre-withdrawal levels. Only the Thorak Empire refused. They would not admit that Resolution 4471 had been wrong. They would not give humans veto power over military decisions. They certainly would not allow unrestricted human expansion. But by then, it did not matter. The Thorak were outnumbered. The remaining council members voted to accept humanity's terms by a margin of 37-1. 3 days later, Hyunwoo Kim walked back into a Galactic Council chamber for the first time in 18 months. But this was not the old chamber where he had been humiliated. This was a new chamber on a new station built specifically for the reformed galactic government. The aliens who had once dismissed him now stood as he entered. They showed respect in ways they never had before. Some looked ashamed. Others looked grateful. All of them looked like they had learned hard lessons about the price of prejudice. Hyunwoo took his seat at the high table. Next to him sat representatives from the 4 other permanent members of the new Security Council. Humans were now equals among the galaxy's leaders. Council leader Rathvel called the session to order. His first act was to read a formal statement, apologizing for Resolution 4471 and acknowledging that it had been based on fear rather than facts.